Welcome back to Rabbit Hole Stories, everybody. Today we've got Federico with us, and he's going to obviously invite us down his Bitcoin rabbit hole. But how are you today, Federico?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here with you guys. I had the honor to meet Joel around conferences in Europe, and it's a pleasure to be here. How are you?
Yeah, living the dream, as they say. The weather's quite nice here in the UK, so got to take advantage of it while we've got it. But whereabouts are you in the world? Are you going to dox yourself? Whereabouts are you?
You mean what about me? You mean to talk?
Where in the world? Where in the world are you at the moment?
Oh, right now I'm in Milan. I just got back from
Oh,
my
nice.
just got back from my honeymoon. So I'm quite relaxed right now.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've just got out of honeymoon mode myself. But
oh,
yeah, well
nice.
done. Congratulations to both of you. I hope you took full advantage of your honeymoon
Yeah,
together.
yeah. So right
But
now I'm in Milan, back to Italy, and yeah, I'm planning to go in Riga in the next couple of
Oh,
weeks
cool.
for the Baltic Honey Badger. I don't know if you guys will
hmm
be there,
hmm
but yeah, next big appointment in the Bitcoin sphere.
Nice. So before we get started with your rabbit hole, a quick question, Federico: Inter or AC Milan or AC Milan?
AC Milan,
Oh, okay.
AC Milan.
We'll
Yeah,
need to do a recording with
and
you and Emo from Relay.
there are yeah, exactly. There are two football teams in Milan, which are AC Milan and AC Milan respectively.
They're in blue, right?
Yeah, exactly. They were blue. Yeah.
brilliant, mate. Thank you so much for joining us here at Rabbit Hole Stories. As you know, we're very interested in how people discovered Bitcoin and what is it they're doing now in this space. So, why don't you take us on the journey down your Bitcoin rabbit hole, please?
Yeah, sure. Well, I got into Bitcoin in early 2017, so I was part of the, let's say, the second huge bull run and second Bitcoin era. Let's call it about. Let's call it that. And it was thanks to a friend of mine who was studying engineering back at the time. Now he's an engineer. And in early 2017, he told me you should check out this blockchain thing. He mentioned blockchain, not Bitcoin. And I realized at the time that I already heard about blockchain. I didn't know what it was. I did hear that it was something that could decentralize money, but these words that if you don't actually study what it is, you don't actually realize what its significance might be. And so I really trusted, and I still trust greatly this friend of mine. And I was like, okay, if he says this to me, maybe I have to delve into this. And then this was why I started. Fortunately, the very first content I saw on internet, because of the fact that I'm in Italy. I researched for Italian stuff at the very first, and I got into some of Giacomo Zucco's content and videos and interviews, and that was my lucky moment, I think, because it gave me the imprinting. It gave me the idea of logical thinking. If you ever listen to Giacomo's talks, they are very, very logical. They follow a logical path. And that is something I really appreciated back at the time. But it was not a given. It was not a given fact to listen to people who are logical. As a person who basically doesn't know anything in the space, was a complete noob, it's very easy to fall for marketing stuff and to fall for great wording put together by marketing teams, and to, let's say, DeFi, or no, well, in 2017 it was the ICO bubble, so it was very easy to fall for the new crypto project, the new amazing revolutionary crypto project. And a lot of people I knew fell for that. But I didn't do it. I didn't have my, let's say, shitcoiner beginner phase. because of this. Because of the fact that I virtually met Giacomo Zucco online with my very first contents, and I started like this. Obviously, I was working in a newspaper. I'm a journalist. I was very curious about it, and after a few months, it didn't. At the very first, it was a curiosity. After a few months, it became almost an obsession. The game changer was the Bitcoin standard. When Saifedean's book came out, I read it suddenly. It took me 3 days to read it. I was completely taken by this book, and that was the eureka moment for me. That was the moment in which I realized, holy shit, this is something. This is going to change a lot of things. I have to study this thing. I have to study. I have to invest my time in this. I have to go on. I cannot, I cannot afford to work 10, 12 hours per day with a modest pay and just to, run through my hamster wheel without actually studying what this thing is, because this is the future. I did it. I started studying it, and fast forward in 2021, I decided to quit my job and dedicate myself to Bitcoin.
That's a big leap to make. What was it that actually made you make that leap? What was the motivation behind that, and how is it doing now for you?
Well, as I told you, I'm a journalist, so I always worked in the information industry. I used to work for the main private, we would say, mainstream media in Italy, the main competitor of Sky News, just to give a reference. And then I also worked for the media relation company, so I always worked in the information field. And studying Bitcoin, getting to know the Bitcoin space, I realized that in Italy there was nothing cool as an information product, especially a written product. There was a podcast, which is still the biggest podcast in Italy. It's called Bitcoin Italia Podcast. These guys are very cool, are actually very competent, and they're great. But that was it. There was a podcast. And there were a few websites, but it was basically all shitcoiners and shitcoining, and there was no signal. There was no signal. So I just realized that the fact that there was nothing Bitcoin only, written product, newsletter, or whatever. And I said, okay, what can I do? My first thought was back to your original question. Or was the thought that made me quit my job? The first thought was that I want to work for Bitcoin. I want to do something for Bitcoin. I think that everyone has this kind of need, feels this need after a while. Bitcoin gives you a lot of stuff, and I don't mean economically. I mean also mentally, philosophically. It opens your mind. And then after a while, you feel the need to give something back. That was my need. I wanted to do this. What can I do? Well, I'm a journalist. I think I can write. Let's start a newsletter. And it was the very first newsletter, Bitcoin only newsletter, strictly Bitcoin only newsletter. In Italy, it's still nowadays it's the biggest one. It has almost 3,000 subscribers. It's in Italian only. And I think that in the long run, it might be a good bet, let's say. But that's basically this is the reason. There was nothing in the information market, which was Bitcoin only. It was written, and I saw a chance.
Were you beforehand, when you worked as a journalist, were you already involved in economics, politics, or certain fields of that nature, or was it completely different?
Well, I was
Mm,
journalistic
okay.
journalist. So, well, at the very first, I started as a sports journalist, but I'm talking when I was 19, 20,
Mm,
21, 22. So a few years in sports journalism. Then I realized I wasn't willing to do Brazilian championship
yeah.
chronics for my whole career, and then I joined the mainstream media.
Mm,
As I told you, I worked in an all news TV channel, which also has a website. So it was quantity over quality.
okay. Yeah.
It was everything, write about everything without
Mm,
knowing basically nothing. You have to just write a few sentences. Yeah, maybe you have the news from your sources,
mm,
but you don't have the actual time to do an in-depth article
mm,
or actually, to give value to the readers. In my opinion, um, I I already had this feeling before deciding to quit my job.
mm,
Bitcoin, in some way, let's say that exploited this feeling because Bitcoin helped me go in depth
mm,
and try to focus more to reach the real reason of the real why of stuff happens basically, because every day in the news you can read the ECB has
mm,
decided to raise 50 basis points, but what the hell does it mean?
mm, mm,
And you can read what is quantitative easing online, but yeah, okay. Once you know that the central banks buy public debt, what the hell does it
mm,
mean?
mm,
Eventually,
mm.
Yeah.
you can get it in the mainstream media, and so I decided to do my part.
That's exactly what it means by going down the rabbit hole, right? Every
Yeah,
question is
exactly.
just a number of other questions, and you can't not find out the answers once you've realised what the answer was to the previous one. It just becomes this ever rolling investigation, if you like, into the Bitcoin ecosystem, and it's almost kind of turned your journalistic specialism into like a high time preference role into a low time preference role, right? As well, because you can invest the actual time you need to actually deliver some quality material on the stuff you found down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, definitely.
What is what is the what article have you written that's um, really sort of resonated with people? What kind of content is it that people can expect to read when they're going through your content online?
Well, ironically, I have to give you two different answers because the first one is not what people usually should expect from my newsletter. The article more resonated was an article about the Ethereum's failure in a Bitcoin only newsletter. Out of 119, 20 articles I wrote in a couple of years, a couple of in-depth articles that I wrote in a couple of years, I wrote one article about Ethereum and why it's a scam, in my opinion. And it is still nowadays the most viewed, the most commented, the most. It generated the biggest debate. But usually usually I do not write about crypto and DeFi and shit and scams. I focus on
Mm,
Bitcoin and its implication. Implications. Bitcoin Train is meant as a journey. That's why it's called Bitcoin Train. The articles are called stops, so it's from stop 0 to stop 119, I think, right now, and counting. And it's meant like this. In the first few articles, you have the very basics. You get the very basics on Bitcoin. The idea is that you don't have to study Bitcoin because I told you to do it, but because maybe you're curious about it and you find out about it through the latest news. The claim is discovering Bitcoin through the latest news. So I basically pick a news. As I told you, the central bank decides to modify its interest rates. What the hell does it mean? What are interest rates? Why are they manipulated by the central banks? has always been like this. What is Austrian economics? Why they think that central banks manipulate economy? What does Bitcoin have to do with Austrian economics and stuff? So through a journey from the latest news to the Bitcoin characteristic that has something to do with that news, I try to explain Bitcoin, and that is a journey. In the first very few articles, you can find explanation about Bitcoin mining because China banned mining. China banned mining maybe 12 times, 15 times. I don't remember. But when the time comes that something happens, I try to explain in the Bitcoin context what it means. And that is the journey. After a few articles, you get to more in-depth or more complicated stuff. So you get Austrian economics, you get politics, you get what the hell is anarchism and why it's not necessarily Darwinism or people killing each other in the streets, and what's environmentalism and the energy market. And basically, a Bitcoin newsletter is an everything newsletter because Bitcoin covers everything. It's extremely multidisciplinary. I often get the question, "What the hell? Seriously, you're a Bitcoin newsletter? You find something to write every week?" And my usual answer is that I find it difficult to choose what to write every week because there's too many things. There's too much stuff. And so Bitcoin is, if you want to get Bitcoin, you don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to be a politician. You don't have to be an economist. You don't have to be expert in one thing. You do have to know something about everything. And that's basically what keeps me doing this, because you have to study every single day.
It's an interesting take because I listened to, you may know him as well, Nico Jilch. He's a German journalist, Bitcoin journalist. And in his latest Bitcoin podcast in German today, he also said it's very weird. You go from this very high time preference thing in the media landscape, I used to experience as well, into a very low time preference thing. And you would think you can actually focus on a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, you go like, oh, now I go into, as you said, energy, remittances issues, basically how the different monetary systems we have in the world works, why our money is not the same as essentially central banks and commercial banks and investment banks' money.
Yeah.
And that's the ironic thing, right? You touch down, you spread out, and you're able to bring it back to Bitcoin somehow. And I guess this is really the kind of content we also need, because if normal citizens struggle with, I don't know, maybe currently paying their energy bills, and then go down how does the energy system works, and like, why do I have to pay in a foreign currency for my local stuff, and why can't I just pay in something that works instantly? I think over time these kind of things take on more of their own life, and basically it's easier to orange pill people at the end of the day. And as you said, you do everything in Italian, and you have the Bitcoin Italia podcast, I think it's called. Have you ever thought about expanding your journalism outside of writing into, video or audio as well? Or are you for the moment now strictly just writing written word and stuff?
Yes, I did. But my articles are in-depth articles, so they take 2-3 days to write. I write 6 articles per month right now. And for each article, I also do a podcast, which is basically the audio version of the articles. It's an audiobook basically. For people, I have like paid subscribers who can listen to the article, and free subscribers who can only read it. And also I do some interviews. I think I did in a couple of years. I did maybe 15 interviews, not a lot. And those interviews go on YouTube. But it's not my main work. My main work is writing, and I think it's kind of, it's good because you have to differentiate yourself. I'm not very good in social media. I'm not very good in keeping my Instagram up to date, my TikTok up to date. I try to do a TikTok profile for Bitcoin trade. I fucking hate it. It's impossible. I basically TikTok is a theft on of your time. It allows your mind to not focus on anything, and it steals your attention, and it's a nightmare. I basically threw out TikTok out of the window after a few weeks. I started it, and my only social media is Twitter, obviously, because the whole Bitcoin space is there. But uh, I perfectly know that an information figure nowadays has to be basically everywhere on social media, on its own product, maybe with a website, and do basically everything. But I also think that if you are specific on one platform, on one topic, on one thing, and you keep your credibility in the long run, this pays off.
Yeah, slow and
Yeah,
steady wins the race, as they say. And the comment about TikTok, I agree in the sense that it just kind of
yeah,
sucks you in, and it just kind of it's a good distraction tool, but you get sucked in, and before you know it, you've been on it for far too long than you should have been. But it's almost become an addictive thing for people just to sort of lose themselves scrolling through these short little videos. How can we get people? How can Bitcoiners as a whole get people to look away from their screens a little bit, to focus a little bit on Bitcoin more? What can we do to really sort of put the signal out there that people can hear? Because it just seems to me, the reason why I'm asking this question is that people are looking for sort of like some sort of loud, significant payoff at the end of a short little video, and that's all they're looking for. But obviously the content that we're putting out there is in depth. We're talking about fundamentals, we're talking about what's broken with the world, and it's not that easy for people to sort of give it a good look. So have you had any ideas?
I thought I had an idea, but now I think, as I may have understood you do, that it's a completely different audience. Um, uh, in Riga, I think it was in Riga last year. Michael Saylor, he was speaking in Riga, and he said we should make TikTok information on Bitcoin. We should make TikTok videos on Bitcoin if we want Bitcoin to go mainstream. And back at the time, I agreed. I thought if we actually want mass adoption, after a year, I changed my mind, and I think that mass adoption is bullshit. But last year, I thought if we really want mass adoption, we have to change our communication, our language. We must change our language. TikTok is a completely different language. Um, if compared only to Twitter, not to long form posts or articles, just compare it to Twitter, and it's completely different language. So my idea last year was to try to go fishing on TikTok with short videos, catchy videos about Bitcoin, about the price that goes up, or maybe how do you set up your wallet. These are a few steps, and then maybe the 5%, 2%, 3% of the people that you get from TikTok, maybe they get into your newsletter, your podcast, your blog, your whatever, and you gain public, and you basically orange pill people, changing their language. But I changed my mind. I changed my mind because of how TikTok works. TikTok, as you perfectly said, basically allows you to stop thinking. You can just take your phone, scroll a few videos, and then those few videos become a lot of videos, and then an hour has passed and you didn't notice. You just basically switched off your brain and went with the flow. TikTok is something that is meant not to think, and Bitcoin is meant, you have to think to get what Bitcoin means. They are two completely different things. So right now, I don't think that TikTok is the best platform to communicate about Bitcoin. Yes, I know maybe right now, at least in the Western world, and China, and TikTok is the most used social media, and so you're cutting off the vast majority of the possible audience. But that audience is going to screw itself. They're not going to make it if they're not incentivized in some way. I don't know. Maybe there's a way to make people understand what Bitcoin is on TikTok as well. But I don't know that that is the kind of content that goes viral. Other things go viral.
Yeah, and the videos I've seen on there regarding anything in relation to crypto, it's all crypto basically. Like it's like the comparisons or the price predictions with like the Lambo in the background with some dramatic music and stuff like that. That's the only real stuff I'm seeing. But then when I flick through and I see like, yeah, it's just I don't know. It's crazy. It's crazy. I don't know. But yeah, I understand what you're saying in the sense that it really requires people to pay attention and to take the time. And those getting lost on TikTok are going to remain lost, and they're going to have to put the work in eventually. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, it's an interesting point you make.
And you also raised a very good point, I think, which maybe it's a blind spot in our community, but I think and oftentimes they or the community itself focuses too much on, Bitcoin has already won. And we then start out putting out these weird narratives where you go like, well, if you actually speak to people in the industry who, work on these products, who provide the infrastructure, this is not the case. Can you maybe, if you want, dive it down into why you think hyper-Bitcoinization is BS, like you said so perfectly before?
Yeah. Let's say first that I too think that Bitcoin has already won. The only thing that is in discussion is the time span. Bitcoin has already won, but my thinking right now is that if we move at this rhythm right now, maybe it could take at least a century to have a world in which wherever you go, you can pay in Bitcoin as a stable purchasing power and stuff. If you want hyper Bitcoinization to become faster, obviously something has to happen. Maybe TikTok has to bring millions and millions of people discovering this amazing thing, which is Bitcoin, and passing thousands of hours studying it. But I don't think that's the reality. So I do think that Bitcoin has won, but I do not think that I will see in my life the hyper Bitcoinization. Maybe my son or my daughter will see, or my nephews. I don't know. That's one thing. Why hyper Bitcoin mass adoption is BS? Mass adoption is BS because mass adoption will be reached with CBDCs because they are easy to use. Mass adoption means, I think, mass adoption means usability, using one instrument without actually know what you are doing. In the short term, I mean, if we want to believe that Bitcoin in a 5 years time frame will be used by, I don't know, 50% of the global population. Maybe out of this 50%, it's 90% will use Wallet of Satoshi in a custodial way. And that's not Bitcoin, that's a CBDC. And that's maybe a not inflationable CBDC, but it's a CBDC. It's a spyware. If a huge part of the population uses just one application of the protocol, it becomes internet. I think internet has failed in decentralizing information. Not internet, the web. The web has failed in decentralizing information, because the idea of the internet was that I think the idea of the internet was to regain the power of the information. And nowadays, on the internet, on the web, if you want to read about something, you read mainstream media, just as you did a couple of decades ago. It's hugely centralized. Yeah, the internet is an open protocol, but do you use Google? Obviously, I use Google. Do you use WhatsApp? Do you use Meta? Obviously, you use Meta. You use TikTok? Obviously, I use TikTok. There are a few gatekeepers that control everything, and that's mass adoption. And I don't want that mass adoption for Bitcoin. For Bitcoin, I want thousands of wallets, open source wallets, possibly. I want thousands of ways to do, I don't know, multisig, or I don't know. Every single individual has to find its own way to store and to spend and to earn its Bitcoin. There shouldn't be a standardized way, because that's socialism, and I don't want that kind of word. So I would prefer, yes, obviously, mass adoption, but I would prefer not to be able to testify this mass adoption. I don't want to be alive when the mass adoption comes, because if the mass adoption comes and I will be alive, then Bitcoin, I don't think it will have reached its goal. Maybe when censorship arrives, I have one basically. I think that if mass adoption comes in the short term, the tools that people use in order to use Bitcoin will be centralized. I said wallet of Satoshi, but it could be anything. And if the tools will be centralized, then censorship will come. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when censorship will come. And when censorship will come, a few people, rug pull by rug pull, will start learning about self-custody, and will start learning about how to properly use Bitcoin. It's not a coincidence that in the Western world everyone talks about trading, and in Argentina or in South America or in Africa people talk about wallets. It's not a coincidence. It's need. When you have the need to use Bitcoin, then you will use Bitcoin properly. Otherwise, you will always be exposed to censorship, apart a few niche of passionate people who are passionate about Bitcoin. That's it. Short term, I think it will be censored Bitcoin. Long term, maybe there will be the actual mass adoption, the real mass adoption, but it's not something I will be able to write, I think.
Okay, so currently not on the horizon, which I think makes also sense with what I see, because I personally believe there's too much hype in the Bitcoin ecosystem currently. A bit different from when I got in, so it's a funny contrast to see both ends.
When did you get in?
2013, but properly 2017. So I was sort of in that, early to, I call it the first proper bull run. Like 2017 was when it, was in the big media outlets worldwide. There were a few articles beforehand. It was listed with Bloomberg in 2013. So all of these things were there, but
it became mainstream.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the second point is, I like your analogy with the information age, because the internet inevitably should be decentralized. Like, we can have protocols running on the TCP stack,
Yeah.
but the main stack is captured, and it will always be captured, whether that is by big tech companies or three-letter agencies, depending how far you want to go down that rabbit hole. With Bitcoin, you have the ability to build on there. Maybe with the trade-off that we just have to take more time to get it done properly, which is, I think, something a lot of people lack, to get the patience to get out there. But it's interesting. So you're also on the train. There will be hyper Bitcoinization, and we have to do it the proper way. Do you think with like the next couple of bull runs, because they're always, again, hype people on Bitcoin Twitter going like, oh no, it just takes 2 more, 3 more halvings, and like you'll see people will soon get it. I'm just super skeptical, because for most people it's still a speculation tool.
Yeah, I do not think that in a couple of halvings we'll be, as I told you before, we'll be in a hyper Bitcoinized world. The only thing that I think is that Bitcoin comes with the need of using it. Whenever the fiat bubble continues to grow, there's no problem. No one gives a shit about it. No one realizes they are actually in a fiat bubble. Inflation is still 2, 3, 4, 5, 10%, whatever, 10% inflation. It's 1/10 of my salary. No problem. I will ask for a raise that punctually never comes. But it's not. Yeah, it's a worsening of your life conditions, but it's not a state of necessity. I know that maybe it's bad to say it, but maybe Bitcoin will be used by people who are actually in a state of necessity. They when they have no freaking alternative, when they have their CBDC account that is blocked because they bought a piece of meat that they were not allowed to buy, or whatever, or maybe they have different political opinions from compared to the current government, or they have, I don't know, whatever. When people are censored, then they have to find an alternative in order to survive. People will use Bitcoin to survive. I think that's the only actual reason to use Bitcoin, other than being interested in it or making money about it. And this moment will come. It will be different in different areas of the world, but the fiat bubble will burst at one point. And when the fiat bubble will burst, everything goes to shit. And the more time we wait, the worse will be the crisis. So obviously, I would hope that maybe tomorrow a few big banks crack and everyone realizes that Bitcoin is the solution. But it won't be like this. A few banks went bankrupt in the US a few months ago, and nothing really changed about Bitcoin. Yeah, it went up a little bit in price, but I don't know if that was the actual reason. It also there was also interest rates involved and stuff. I do think, but I do think that when the real fiat bubble bursts, and what I mean with fiat bubble bursting is big Western states going bankrupt. There are two ways that the fiat bubble might burst. One is the bankruptcy, the actual bankruptcy, the formal one, in which a state is not able and is not anymore able to pay its public debt. The other way is hyperinflation, because if a state does not want to go bankrupt, it might want to ask for another liquidity injection from the central bank that buys more public debt in order to pay the former debt. That's basically the fiat bubble. But when the central bank injects money, then it creates more inflation.
Worked
So the
perfectly for
ways are
Greece.
basically two.
Worked perfectly for Greece,
Exactly,
right?
Yeah.
exactly. So the ways are basically two: hyperinflation, and that means the bubble bursting, because when you have 100% inflation, then you have Argentina, and in Argentina people are actually using Bitcoin. And the other scenario is actual bankruptcy, and
Yep.
people who have maybe thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars and euros in public debt, because at least in Italy, families are the tradition of a tradition is to invest in real estate or public debt. These two things are considered the two safest thing. Let alone the thing that the little detail that the public debt gives you. In the Italian bond gives you like 2% interest in front of a 10% inflation, but that doesn't necessarily means anything, because you're investing in the Italian state.
Which changes like every
Um,
two months, it feels like. So like, you have the added
yeah,
casino on top of that.
yeah. And so a lot of people, at least in Italy for sure, but I think all over the world, will find itself with way less money than they have right now in a few years, and maybe not in a few years, maybe in a decade
Mm.
or in a couple of decades. But I don't think it will go much further. And at the time, a lot of people will be in need. I don't know if that is the time that mass adoption becomes reality, but I think that will be the time in which mass adoption will start, at least.
I mean, you've got a forever shifting landscape at the moment in the world, and like today, I think, isn't it? You've got the BRICS nations, as we're recording
Yeah,
this meeting today, to discuss various sort of new political regimes and things like that, and maybe coming up with their own sort of currency backed by gold and all that kind of stuff. Whether that's actually going to happen or whether that's a reality or not, I don't know. But you've got a lot of narratives going on at the moment about how the world and the global elite is kind of shifting. So I do start to see, I'm starting to see the signs that the economy is starting to undergo this huge change. And I think it's going to create a wave of confusion and control grabbing and laying in wait while all this is going on is TikTok next block, right? You got Bitcoin laying in wait. So I do think there is opportunity there for people to come on board in those moments of chaos and confusion. And that's, I think, how a lot of people get in is when they get burnt, they start to realize what that was, and then that's when they first discover the rabbit hole. But I think you're right in the sense that there is a lot of hopium out there. There's a lot of content out there saying, within the next X amount of years and things like that. And I think people are obviously biased. They're obviously keen to see Bitcoin being adopted as quick as possible. But I think they get lost in that hope that it narrows the sort of window for them. But what I'm hearing from you is that a more realistic approach. It's going to be a slow adoption for the people that really need it the most first. In Italy, what's the Bitcoin community like there? And what kind of stuff can you see going on over there?
Well, I think that I'd say that I'm astonished by the Italian community. It's growing at an incredible pace in the last few years. Um, Maybe thanks to the podcast as well. But there are a lot of people right now in the Bitcoin space. Mm, as a internationally known people, obviously there was Giacomo, but not there's not a lot of people who are actually very well known in the Bitcoin space. But right now, not right now. Let's say from 2000, yeah, 18, 19, the community actually started to grow at a growing pace. Um, right now, there are a lot of products about Bitcoin, a lot of people who dedicate themselves to Bitcoin. There's a project called Villaggio Bitcoin, which in English is Bitcoin Village. He also wrote a book about Bitcoin. Basically, he's an entrepreneur who opened a store near Brescia, and he orange pills people, and he actually has clients who go there, who want to know about Bitcoin. Yeah, it's a store. It's a normal store, like in the street, like every other kind of store. But while walking there, you see this Bitcoin Village store, and you say, "What the hell is this?" You go there and you find books about Bitcoin, T-shirts, consulting services. There's a community of which I am part, which is the BTC Pay server Italian community. We go around with Orange Pill commercial activities, and we install BTC Pay server for them. I live actually in Monza, which is a little town near Milan. I don't know if you follow Formula One. It's where the circuit of and I orange pill a few merchants in Monza with BTC Pay server. So when you will be, if you want to come here, I will gladly take you to dinner while paying in Bitcoin.
Nice.
And
only if you're paying.
And also there are well, obviously. Well, maybe the owner can make me a discount because I installed this space server. And there is Massimo Musumeci, who's a physicist and also a technician who has I think 6,000 or 7,000 subscribers YouTube channel, and he does tutorials. He talks about Bitcoin, talks about Lightning. He's very well informed. And when you go to conferences right now, there's also I almost forgot to mention. There's the Polito project, which is Politecnico Torino, the technical university from Torino, which has this community called Polito. It's a student group who organized a series of lessons from people from the university and people from high schools in Turin, in a project with the government. And this project is basically a project which is something which is mandatory for students, for high school students. In order to acquire some working experience during their high school, they have to do I don't know what is the number, but an amount of hours during their third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, or so, and they must do some hours in some kind of project in order to get to the next year. And this Bitcoin education project, thanks to those guys, was approved, and it was like a 10 lesson program, 3 hours per lesson, so 30 hours, about the very basics of Bitcoin, the implications of Bitcoin, the mining, the energy industry, and all the main Italian educators went there. Ricky from Bitcoin Italia podcast was there, Giacomo was there, Riccardo Masutti, who's a cybersecurity expert, was there, developers, Italian Bitcoin developers who contributed to the Bitcoin code on GitHub were there. It was an amazing project. And yeah, the community is growing. And when you go to conferences, actually, I think the Italian group in Europe, at least in Europe, I think the Italian group is the biggest one.
Yeah. I remember going to Lugano last year, sitting in the train from Zurich.
Yeah, well, obviously Lugano.
And I looked over.
It's almost our home conference.
I remember sitting in the train, looking down the aisle, and I go like, I bet that's a Bitcoiner. And then immediately you hear like, and I saw the hand signs, and they talk about sats and bits, and I go like, perfect.
Oh, yeah. That's brilliant.
Before we head towards the end, Federico, I wanted to quickly mention one part. I've seen, maybe it was last couple of weeks, but definitely more times over. You, as a journalist, also calling out fellow Bitcoin media companies for basically either, I don't want to call it defrauding or anything, but, you know, portraying certain aspects of Bitcoin in a different way, when if you are boots on the ground, you know this is either not true, or they take something out of context and obviously display it differently. And I think one of the biggest thing lacking in the media landscape generally is that accountability. How much has that impact in your work? Is that always at the top of the list for you? Do you want to be as accountable as possible? Or were there also any other reasons for you to be this vocal? Because I think I like it. That's what we need, right? We'll need to call out the BS if we see it.
I quit my job because I wasn't free to say whatever I wanted to say. And so the answer is obviously yes. If I want to be free in my journalism work, and if a journalist is not free, then someone is going to get wrecked. Something is wrong. And you were referring obviously to Bitcoin Magazine backing Kennedy's proposal of creating a new hard dollar, backing the dollar with Bitcoin, even if in a not in a hard way, like in a soft way, from starting with I don't know 3%, 4%. I don't remember the actual backing percentage, but yeah, that was bullshit, because if you back the dollar with Bitcoin, you're going bankrupt. Even if your name is Bitcoin Magazine, no, not even if, because of the fact that your name is Bitcoin Magazine and you're doing information about Bitcoin, you should not compromise. You should not accept compromises. You should, as your podcast is named after, you should be ready to get down to the rabbit hole of everything, of fucking everything. And so even if Bitcoiners don't seem for politicians, basically, because if you back Bitcoin, if you understand Bitcoin well enough, you don't back politicians. You don't seem for politicians. And if you seem for politicians, I can maybe understand it, but holy shit, you have to really make them explain every single thing of their fucking program. You just don't have to take their declarations and publish them without any further question or at least attempt to explain them properly. This is a feature that obviously, at least this is a mentality that obviously should be in every journalist mind, but we very well know that it's not like this, especially in the mainstream industry. But I can understand someone in the mainstream industry, because I've been in the mainstream industry. I saw the amount of time that you have to produce the news, and it's not that large. It's basically, as I said before, it's quantity over quality. If you're inside Corriere della Sera or La Repubblica, which are basically the Guardian or the Times, the Italian equivalent, you have chiefs and you have to obey them. You're not completely free, but if you are a Bitcoiner, it's impossible to forget this. It's impossible to forgive the lack of depth, the lack of
truth.
Yeah, I mean, the lack of truth. Yeah, you have to understand every single thing, the whole logical process that brings a sentence to the news, to the headlines. Okay, Kennedy says that he wants to back the dollar with Bitcoin. How? What are the consequences? How is going to do this? And if he doesn't provide the sentences, you publish the article stating that he was not able to provide the answers about his statement. It's not. Yeah, I mean, I understand. You're a Bitcoiner and you want Bitcoin to succeed. There's a politician who is talking in a good manner about good manners about Bitcoin, but it doesn't mean anything. I mean, we're on the same page as the mainstream media. If we do this kind of process, we're not changing anything.
I remember.
It's amazing how quick they changed the opinion from, because the narrative used to be, sorry to interrupt you, Gerard, the narrative used to be, politicians, they're old, they're out of touch, they don't represent truth anymore, don't trust anything a politician says. And as soon as you've got a politician uttering the words, I want to support Bitcoin, it's amazing how like the flip happened of now, you know, we all suddenly went to sort of like respect this and believe this politician. It doesn't quite add up. So it's almost like, are you just sort of selling out just for the sake of, you know, clicks, or are you sort of just trying to find where the money is for your project?
Or because you're part of the pack of Kennedy as well. So, like, you know,
right.
You have to look at these relations.
Yeah.
And I find this so funny. Back when I still used to work in the media landscape, my first and second editor always called me out for having too much personality in my writing. And I go, but that's what people want. If I speak to my mate, I want to convince them of my point of view and show them the facts as I've been presented. Granted, I did a lot of opinion writing, so I was able to express them. And I remember in his office, he had a quote by George Orwell, fucking saying journalism is printing what someone else does not want published, otherwise it's public relations. And I go, that's what you do.
Absolutely.
That's what you fucking do. You are the PR company of, you know, your sponsors if you don't actually convince people of presenting them with facts. And, you know, there's nothing wrong if a politician likes Bitcoin. Okay, he may have been orange-pilled, but we should be reasonable in thinking that will probably be abused just based on what happened in the past. And if it doesn't, great. And if not, let's attack these things from all angles, because guess what? Bitcoin, I think, has survived a long time and will in the coming, you know, dips and FUD articles and everything, because it's being constantly attacked. So if we do the same thing with the community, inevitably, we should get to a hyper-Bitcoinized world without having these weird hype and dumb phases, which you just see these days.
Sure. And what you mentioned also happened in these last few days with Javier Milei in Argentina, who won the elections, the primary election, which are not the actual elections, which will take place in October. He's considered an anarcho-capitalist, an Austrian economist. He talked about Bitcoin. He said Bitcoin is good. It's a good thing. It will bring money again to the private sector, back to the private sector and stuff. And people on Twitter cheered at least Bitcoin Twitter cheered the triumph of Milei in Argentina, because it was not expected. Everyone else was basically going crazy about about the results. But this is the same thing as the Kennedy stuff. If you're a Bitcoiner, you have to kind of understand what's going on with Milei. I'm about to publish an article on Saturday. My next article of my newsletter will be an article about Milei. And Milei obviously has a lot of interesting points about his views on Austrian economics or the role of government on the economy and stuff. But he also wants to dollarize Argentina. And this is a completely, how is it possible that you want to dollarize Argentina and you're in favor of Bitcoin? These are contradictions, and I try. I'm not saying that I'm a scientist and I can find the very truth, the true life's truth in my articles, but at least I try to delve in the fact and to analyze what, in my opinion, in my very opinion, as Joel said before, is a contradiction. As long as you are intellectually honest, you're a journalist, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And it's important that we have these discussions and be critical in this space. And this is part of Joel and I's sort of mission now, I think. It's become listening to people and how they got into Bitcoin. It's inspired me to sort of really sort of take in on board what all these stories are and the origin stories of it and what's motivated people. And what's clear to me is that people are passionate about Bitcoin, and they want it to succeed, and they believe in the fundamentals. But there are a lot of things out there in the world of content that is distracting. It is clickbaiting. It isn't quite exactly, the truth, and things are out there that aren't actually verified, and people are just going with it as truth, and it's a lot of distraction and noise. And if people like yourself are putting out signal and doing the best for Bitcoin and challenging those that you feel are not representing Bitcoin in the right way, I think it's the right thing to do. And I think more people should do that. So thank you for taking the time and your energy to do that, because I know it's not easy to challenge the ecosystem, because you do tend to get a lot of shit posting on the back of that sort of stuff as well. Before we wind the episode down, Joel and we do a little challenge at the end of each of our episodes, and that's the All Roads Lead Back to Bitcoin challenge. And we ask you a word or give you a phrase, and you got to try and relate that back to Bitcoin. And Joel and I were secretly texting whilst talking to you about what that word could be, and we've come up with the word mafia. How does that relate back to Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, Bitcoin is meant to eradicate mafia. And with mafia, I mean actual mafias and governments.
Short and sweet and easy. Yes, the true
Yeah, exactly.
the true mafias of the world. It does disable and it takes away their power. So I like it. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for inviting us down your Bitcoin rabbit hole. It's been a fascinating journey with you, and you're a friend of the show, like all of our guests, and you're welcome back anytime to further explore the Bitcoin rabbit hole or go and talk about other things. So welcome back anytime, my friend, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.